The Duke of Elmsgrove had watched a great many cruelties in a great many ballrooms, but he had never before watched a woman walk into a room already braced for it. The way a soldier walks onto a field he knows he will not leave whole. Her name was Rosalind Meade, and Percival Hartley, Duke of Elmsgrove, learned it in the same breath he heard it made into a weapon. He was standing at the edge of the Ashworth Assembly, a glass of wine untouched in his hand, when a knot of fashionable young women near the door began to laugh behind their fans, and he followed their eyes and saw her. A woman of perhaps 25, in a gray silk gown that had been fine 3 seasons ago, pausing at the top of the steps with her chin level and her gloved hands folded, and the left side of her face and throat marked with the pale, puckered scarring of an old burn. "There she is," one of the young women said, not troubling to lower her voice. "The Meade creature. 10 years and her family still trots her out as though anyone would have her. My mother says she stood too near a fire as a girl, and this is the ruin of it. I cannot think why they do not simply keep her at home." "Perhaps they hope the candlelight is kind," said another, and they all laughed again, and Rosalind Meade, who could not possibly have failed to hear it, walked down the steps into the room as though she had heard nothing at all. Percival did not laugh. He set down his glass. He knew a thing or two about being looked at. He had come home from the wars with a reputation for grimness and a habit of silence, and he knew the particular labor of walking into a room that has already decided what you are. But he had a duke's title to armor him, and this woman had nothing at all, nothing but the straightness of her back and a courage so quiet it had taken him a moment to recognize it for what it was. He watched her cross the room. He watched the small choreography of cruelty rearrange itself around her, the way conversations paused and resumed, the way a matron drew her daughter's skirts aside as though scarring were a thing one might catch, the way a cluster of men by the card room looked her over and then, deliberately, looked away. 10 years, the girl by the door had said. Rosalind Meade had been enduring this for 10 years, and she had learned to endure it without a flicker, and there was something in that flawless composure that struck Percival as more terrible than any weeping would have been. A person did not learn such stillness except by needing it very often. She found a chair against the far wall, the chair, he understood, that was always hers at the edge of every gathering, where she might sit unremarked and give no one the satisfaction of watching her sit alone. She arranged her skirts. She folded her hands. She fixed her eyes on the middle distance and prepared, with the patience of long practice, to be got through. Percival crossed the room to her. He was aware, as he went, of the change he set in motion, of heads turning, of the whisper running ahead of him, for the Duke of Elmsgrove did not attend assemblies to be sociable, and everyone knew it, and here he was walking the length of the floor toward the one guest no one else would go near. He did not care. He had spent 3 years since the war caring very little for the opinion of rooms like this one. He stopped before her chair and bowed. "Miss Meade," he said, "I am Elmsgrove. Will you dance with me?" She looked up at him. For the first time that evening her composure faltered, not into distress, but into a wary, disbelieving stillness, the look of a person who has been the butt of enough jokes to suspect every kindness of being the setup for one. "Your grace is very good," she said, low and even, "but I think you will find you have mistaken me for someone else. I do not dance. I have not danced in 10 years. A pause, her chin lifted a fraction. "And I would ask you not to make sport of me. I am too old for it and too tired, and I had thought myself past being worth the trouble." "I am not making sport of you," Percival said. "I do not, as a rule, cross ballrooms for sport. I find it tiring." He held out his hand. "I am asking because I have been watching you for a quarter of an hour, and in that time you have shown more courage sitting in that chair than any soldier I commanded showed under fire. I should like to dance with a brave person. There are so few of them in a room like this." On the 4th visit, when the household had grown used enough to him that Rosalind's mother left them the length of a room's privacy, she said the thing she had plainly been holding since the assembly. She was standing at the window with her scarred side to the light. A thing, he had noticed, she never did before others, always turning the unmarked cheek to a room like a coin showing its good face. "You should understand what you are courting, your grace," she said without turning. "I do not fade in daylight. There is no soft candle in the country kind enough. Whatever you decide, decide it here in this window where you can see the whole of it and not repent later in some finer light when it is too late for both of us." Percival crossed the room and came to stand beside her in the window, in the plain, flat morning light that hid nothing. "I have seen the whole of it," he said. "I saw it the first night in a ballroom full of candles, and I have thought of little else since." He did not reach for her, he only looked, steadily and without flinching, until she made herself turn and let him. "You keep offering me a chance to flee, Miss Meade, as though you cannot believe a man would stay once he had looked properly. I have looked properly. I am still here. I mean to go on being here. You will have to grow accustomed to it." It was the first time he saw her smile with the whole of her face, the marked side and the unmarked, together, unguarded, and he thought he had never in his life seen anything he wanted more to see again. Something crossed her marked face then, the first unguarded thing he had seen there, and it was so raw that he nearly looked away out of courtesy, and did not, because he sensed that to look away would be its own small cruelty. She had spent 10 years watching people look away. "You are serious," she said. "I am seldom anything else. It is one of my many failings." He kept his hand out. "The room is watching, Miss Meade. I will not pretend it is not, but I would rather it watched us dance than watched you sit. Will you let it?" She rose. It was the bravest thing he had ever seen anyone do at a party, and he had been to a great many. He led her onto the floor, and the assembly's murmur swelled and then, as the musicians struck up, fell strangely quiet, because there is nothing so silencing to a cruel room as the sight of the very person it has scorned being chosen openly, by the one man in it whose choosing carries weight. Percival was aware of the group by the door, the young women who had laughed going still, their fans lowered. He was aware of the matron who had drawn her daughter's skirts aside, now watching with her mouth slightly open. Let them watch. He turned his whole attention to the woman before him. She danced stiffly at first, 10 years out of practice, her eyes down. He talked to her low, the way he had once talked young frightened men through their first action of nothing, of the musicians, of the absurdity of the potted palms, until her shoulders came down from around her ears, and she began, cautiously, to move with him rather than merely to be moved. "You are not going to ask me," she said abruptly on the second turn. "Ask you what?" "How it happened. Everyone asks in the end. They always want the story of the fire so they may decide whether it was my fault." Her voice was very controlled. "You have not asked, and it is making me nervous waiting for it." "I do not need the story of the fire," Percival said. "I have my own fire, Miss Meade, a farmhouse in Spain, and men I could not reach in time, and I have carried it inside where it does not show, which I have come to think is worse in some ways than carrying it where it does. I did not cross this room to learn how you were hurt. I crossed it because I watched you bear being hurt, over and over in this room tonight, without once letting it bend you, and I thought, there is a person I should like to know. There is a person worth 10 of anyone laughing behind a fan." She missed a step. He caught her, steadied her, went on as though nothing had happened, and by the time the set ended she was, he saw it and his chest ached with it, very near to weeping, and holding it back with the identical discipline she had held everything back all evening. "Do not," he said gently as he bowed over her hand. "Not here, do not give them that. You have given them nothing all night, do not begin now. Save it for somewhere they cannot see." "Why are you being kind to me?" she whispered. "Because someone should have been for 10 years, Percival said, "and no one was, and I find I cannot bear it. Miss Meade, may I call on you? Properly. Tomorrow and the day after, and for as long as you will tolerate the company of a grim man with his own scars, until you are persuaded that I mean precisely what I say." He called the next day, and the next, and for many days after. He learned that Rosalind Meade read 4 languages and had taught herself 2 of them from books alone, in the long years of being kept at home, that she had a dry, sudden wit she had all but forgotten she possessed, that she had long ago given up on being loved and had built, out of that surrender, a self so quietly complete that he came to feel the honor was entirely his. Her family, who had spent a decade trotting her out in hope of a match and enduring the pity, did not know what to make of a duke at their door. Society, which had laughed at her that first night, discovered with remarkable speed that it had always esteemed Miss Meade's accomplishments and only wished it had known her better. Percival let them say it. He knew what it was worth, and he made a point, at every gathering they attended together thereafter, of leading his wife, for she became his wife, in the spring, in a chapel where the sun came through and no candlelight was asked to be kind out onto the floor first, before all the room, so that anyone who might have thought to whisper would remember exactly whose hand she held. At their wedding breakfast, one of the young women who had laughed by the door that first night chastened now, and older and married unhappily herself, came to offer stiff congratulations, and could not help asking, in a small mean effort to understand, what the Duke could possibly have seen. Percival heard it. He came to stand behind his wife's chair and set his hand on her shoulder, over the gray silk she had worn on that first night, which she had kept and remade and chosen to be married in. "You ask what I saw," he said. "I will tell you, since you have never troubled to look. I saw a woman walk into a room that had hurt her for 10 years, knowing it would hurt her again, and walk in anyway with her head high, giving no one the satisfaction of her tears. I have commanded brave men. I never saw braver. The wonder is not that I chose her. The wonder is that any of you had eyes and looked at that face for 10 years and somehow saw nothing at all." Rosalind reached up and covered his hand with hers. "They saw the scar," she said, "and there was no bitterness left in it now, only a kind of peace. You are the only one who ever saw me." "Then they were fools," said the Duke of Elmsgrove, "and I am the most fortunate man in England, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it to you, whether or not any of them ever understands." And he did, and he was, and he never gave any of them another thought.